Welcome to Long Blue Leadership, the podcast where we share insights on leadership through the lives and experiences of Air Force Academy graduates. I'm Navir Walkowitz, class of '99. My guest today is someone whose life has been nothing short of remarkable. Emma Przybyslawski, a 2010 Academy graduate, has lived through challenges that many of us can't even imagine. Her resilience and determination are truly inspiring. She served as a special operator in a combat unit, the only female. She had a vital job operating tactical, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, where she recorded 1,634 confirmed kills. In the line of duty, she survived being shot at in helicopters and worked closely with special operators to take the fight to ISIS in an extremely dangerous environment. A highly effective warfighter, she became known to ISIS by reputation and received letters from them at her base attempting to intimidate her, but she never backed down. Today, Emma is not only the proud mother of a 1-year-old daughter, but also the founder of a thriving defense technology company, continuing her mission to make a difference, leading with the kind of confidence earned through experiences as a cadet, on the battlefield, and in the corporate sector. So Emma, thank you so much for being here. I'd really like to dive into what we just uncovered. Two parts, actually. Can you tell us about the special operations community? And then secondly, we'd really like to understand more about those intimidating letters that you got.
Yeah, absolutely. So the special operations community is exactly what it sounds like. We try to make things pretty straightforward. But there's a community of different units across the joint spectrum that are part of the special operations mission, with just, man, a storied background in history, where it emerged from, with roots going back to World War II, and several like different conflicts later, how that has evolved into what we know today as special operations community. But it includes everything from Navy SEALs to Army Green Berets, to all kinds of different support elements around those operator career fields, of which I was one. So I was an intelligence officer that was a contributing member to the special operations community on the joint side.
Okay.
So you'll
Mhm.
hear people reference the community quite a bit, and that's what they mean when they're talking about SOF.
Got it.
Yeah.
What it?
So
So those
the
letters,
letters,
yes.
the the letters. Um, my last, well, one of my last deployments was an interesting one. We were pushing back into Iraq when ISIS was flaring back up. And I went to support a tactical ISR, or intelligence surveillance and reconnaissance role. And at the time, because the environment was so threatening, there were not operators were not allowed outside the wire, which meant they went stir crazy and worked out too much because they were not allowed to leave the base and go conduct their concept of operations, or a con op. So they were not going out on missions, which meant tactical ISR was the only mission. And we were flying a lot of lines, or ISR lines. So a line is a different aircraft. At any time, we'd have 20 aircraft in the air, for example, that were looking for targets and then prosecuting those targets using, missiles that they had on board, or we'd call assets in to drop bombs on the target. So we were in constant target development mode. And at that time, because we had pulled out of Iraq and now we're going back in, there were a lot of targets to go after. So it was a really interesting time. I was the only US female in country, and at one time, the only female in country. And we had several. So part of the special operations mission is to work with partner nation forces to get them equipped to go out and fight. So it's like a training of these host nation forces so that they're good to go.
Hmm.
And because of that, we are around a lot of Iraqis. And the way that the culture works in Iraq is a lot of these guys likely had a brother or a cousin or someone that was actually on the ISIS side. So it was very common for information about what was going on around US forces getting back to ISIS in this example. And I happen to be at the forefront of one of those stories. Uh, Iraqi men are not like, they just view women differently than American culture does.
Mhm.
And it was an anomaly when Iraqis found out that there was a woman sitting and running all of this tactical ISR that was dropping a lot of ordnance on bad guys and wiping out a lot of bad guys. And that story quickly proliferated, got to the other side, and I started receiving mail um, at where I worked. Somehow it got on base. Like, it's a whole series of unfortunate
Right.
events that led to the delivery of like Valentines to me, basically. There
Oh
were
my
these little
goodness.
love notes about, you know, "You're a woman, what are you doing?" Like, it was just all kinds of like, "You better hope that we don't find you," which is a really, scary thing to receive, but also one of those things that you kind of in the moment, like, the more I think about it now, it's like, "Oh, that's insane," and, like, that could have gone really wrong, but in the moment, it was kinda like, "Okay," and you just, like, moved on with your life, and there were some particularly graphic, gruesome pictures. There was a band of Kurdish women that were actually fighting and like in trenches, like firefighting. And if those women got caught, which some did, it was not a good day for them. And they would send me pictures of like, this is what we did to that woman, like you're next kind of thing. And so it was like a really weird alternate universe
Mm.
that I lived in, but I wouldn't even say like, "Oh, I was so heroic or courageous." It was just one of those things that, um, you just kind of, like, push through and we're like, "Okay, I guess that's a factor now. All I can do is take the next step forward and get along with my day." So that was kind of the long-winded story of my love letters in Iraq that I got.
I think, Emma, we're going to speak more about a lot of your experiences in leadership through the different times you've had, either both in the military and in the private sector. But I'd like to ask you right now, today, in the day in life, what's it like? What's Emma's life like right now?
Chaos. It is sheer chaos having a one-year-old, another one on the way, running a business, working closely with the government on a lot of other projects. So it's just sheer chaos. And every day looks different, which is probably the best part. I'm someone that can get bored easily. I think if anyone reads my resume and all the different places I've worked, it's pretty apparent that I probably have some form of ADD. And so to scratch that itch, having a different day every day really helps deal with my ADD, if you will.
So it sounds like you enjoy, it's really satisfying for you, kind of being in a day that is different every time. So can maybe share what could that look like?
Yeah, so obviously I've been forced to become an early riser, and anyone that graduated the academy knows that you can probably sleep on command anywhere, and we're like known for being narcoleptics in some ways. But I wake up early, get a workout in, and try to get some calmness in before that chaos kicks off. I have like a really good cup of coffee in the morning, and then boom, off to the races. So starts with getting the kiddo up and running, and diving right into the business and all of the cool projects I alluded to that we're working on across the defense space. Um, as you can imagine, things move at different paces across the board. So some days there are higher priorities in other areas, and some days it's quieter. But for the most part, it's always something jam packed with calls, jam packed with meetings, both internally with the team, which are always my favorite, and then also out with customers. Traveling a lot, that always makes things fun. So getting in front of cool people doing cool things and talking to them about how we can help and contribute to the mission, and then try to have dinner as a family every night. That
Love that.
can be hard, but it is a huge priority. And I like to binge at least a show or two. I could go on and on about what my favorites are,
I think we're
but
gonna
I
have
try
to
to
visit
binge.
that at some point.
Yeah, if anyone needs any hot tips, I'm your TV person.
So, Emma, were you always like this even as a young girl? Were you someone that was always an early riser, get right into it, jump in kind of person?
I don't know if my parents would probably tell you I was never an early riser, and this is like a new face that I've put on, because I love to sleep, but always embraced and thrived in, like, the chaos. I've always just liked having a lot of different things going on. I like being engaged on more than one thing, so, I think I've always kind of been that way, and my parents unfortunately made the mistake while they were raising me to make me think that I could really do anything that I wanted to put my mind towards, and so I've, like, stretched that to the max to figure out how many things can I put my mind towards, and here we are.
Wow. So did you know you were gonna go to the academy? How did that even come into your crosshairs, your sights?
There's a picture of me, and I wish I had it, I think it's at my parents' house, of me maybe 6 or 7 years old sitting on the class wall, um, watching a parade go by. My dad's a grad, and he graduated in 1976, and so we just always had something that would take us back to the academy, whether it was a sports camp, which I loved the sports camps. Every year I did them, or it was a football game or some fun event. The academy was always a really big part of our family's lives. And so I think it was just always something in the background. And when I applied to schools, I actually applied to 10 schools because I like to, my dad says, fill a 5 pound bag with 10 pounds worth of crap, and I did that with school. And I got into the academy, and basically my parents were like, "Okay, well, you're going to the academy, aren't you? Like, that's a no-brainer." And the rest is kind of history. Although I did have a little bit of a blip in me being at the academy. Yeah, I think from a young age, I kinda always knew I was gonna be there. So, yeah.
Well, let's talk about that blip because that sounds
Yeah.
really interesting. Can you share more about that?
Absolutely. So I left the academy after my freshman year of school and out processed altogether.
So not after
And I,
basic training, but after your first
no,
year.
after freshman year, I finished out freshman year, took my last final in the spring, and said, I don't know if I want to do this.
Wow.
And my dad served in the Air Force for 34 years, so really the Air Force is all I knew. And for some reason, I had this scratch I needed to itch where I did something not Air Force related just to make sure. At the time, I was like, I want nothing to do with the Air Force. But really, I think in retrospect, it was me considering if it was really what I wanted to do. And so I out processed. I left in good standing, which is a key point we'll revisit in a second. So I was a cadet that left in good standing, and I went to the University of Oklahoma for a year. I will tell you that about 3 months into that whole endeavor, I knew I had made a mistake and
Wow.
started investigating how to get back to the academy. And because I had been in good standing, they let me reapply. The deal was that I would have to graduate with the class that followed my original class. So I was originally class of 2009 and ended up graduating with the class of 2010. And I
Wow.
was on like a weird wonky 5 year program that didn't involve the prep school, which is always really confusing to everyone.
So you did basic training, you did your freshman year twice, essentially, or no?
They didn't make me, they actually let me jump into sophomore year, thank
Okay.
God,
Okay.
because I think it would have been a deal breaker if they were like, "Cool, you get to go back through basic training in freshman year." I wanted to go back, but I don't know if I wanted to go back that bad.
Gosh. Well, I wanna visit some of I think at such a critical time, you were discovering a little bit about yourself. I think through who you are as a leader, what you want to be doing. I'm curious how that worked with your dad being a grad. What was that whole experience like? I guess both on both of you, and also what did you learn about yourself in that?
Man,
I know that's a
such a
loaded
good deep,
question.
it's deep. So you'll get a deep answer.
Okay.
um Candidly, so my dad and I are very close. Both my parents and I are extremely close. And that was a really rough time for us, to be perfectly honest. I was really proud to go to the academy. It was so special to him that I went to the academy. And then when I left, I think he was just like, "So, wait, what? Like, I
Mhm.
didn't even know that was a possibility for this to not, for you to not be a grad." And I think that was a strain on our relationship for sure. Um, and candidly, like from my perspective, I felt like we lost a lot of the connective tissue that we had built for that year because, I could call him and spout all the like nerdy words. He was up on the hill and he was like, "Oh yeah," and it was like kind of our thing. And that was gone overnight because I decided I didn't want to do it. And I think I felt like I struggled to connect with him. He may or may not validate how he felt on his side, but that was one of 2 times in my life where it was a really rough year for our relationship in that we just had nothing in common anymore, it felt like. And so what was really great though, and this is why my dad is the best, is when I went back and said, "Look, I didn't tell them I was reapplying. And I said, "I reapplied, I got back in, and I'm gonna go back." I mean,
You did all that on your own. Like,
I
you
did all
rode
that on
that
my
whole
own.
journey by
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah.
Man.
Yeah. Because I didn't wanna take him on a roller coaster, like,
Right.
I had already, like, ripped the Band-Aid off. We didn't need to rub salt in the wound if I, at 18, 19 years old, changed my mind again, which turns out happens a lot. So, yeah, when I told him I was going back, he was like, "Are you" he was very adamant about, "Are you sure? And are you doing this for you? Because if you're not doing it for you, like, you'll never get through it." And, that was such, like, a great time in our relationship where I was like, "No, I'm doing this for me," and I think I earned some street cred with him too, which was good. And then I went back and I complained every day to him about how much I hated it.
Right.
But, I was
But you
there
knew
for the right reasons.
you knew your core because you had gone to,
Yeah.
what did they say? The grass isn't always greener, but you
Nope.
made sure you went and you explored that and you scratched
Yep.
that itch and then you learned,
Yeah.
really what you did want.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, I came back with a vengeance. And part of it was probably the sting of freshman year had subsided, but I came back and was like, "I chose to be here. I'm gonna do the best I can." And I tried to, I mean, don't look at my report card because that probably isn't, like, the most reflective until maybe, like, junior, senior year, but, like, I really put my heart and soul into making it work and
Wow.
figuring out, like, how to make it the best experience that I could, and, it just made me it was such a pivotal, like, time in my life where I really fully committed to everything that is now shaped to, like, what I'm doing today, so it's pretty
Mhm.
cool.
Have you used that, um, experience, I think, as far as, walking down a path and realizing, "Am I on the right path?" Literally jumping on another path. Have you used that in any of your leadership, um, experiences to date? Have you seen that come into play again, either where you've mentored or coached others or in your own self?
Yes, I think, like, one of my core tenets, like, top 3, is, like, you have to be courageous, and you have to lean forward, and you're not always gonna get it right, but you can course correct. There's very few things actually in life that you can't course correct on, and, yeah, you'll have regrets for sure, and, oh my god, do I have mine, just like anyone else, but if you're not courageous enough to, like, step out for yourself, that's something no one else can do for you. And so whether it's in business or in relationships, or in like literally a workout, like a crazy workout, any facet of my life, I feel like I've always kind of led with that attitude, especially since that event at the academy. Is like I got to do what I think is best, and like if it's not right, I'll figure it out. And that's kind of like been a main thesis of my life and something I try to apply, like I said, across the gamut for myself.
What a huge, I think, leadership lesson for people to kinda digest, being able to realize that being courageous and knowing that in most cases you can course correct, right? You don't have to stay on a path if you know it's wrong. And, gosh, I really wanna dig into that courageous bit a bit more, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think even just we chatted very briefly on it. I think your time in, as an operator. Can we go in there a little bit more? Talk about what some of
Absolutely.
your leadership experiences were there, what you've seen in others, just whatever you're willing to share with us. I think we'd like to see, through your eyes, what that looked like.
Absolutely. So I was fortunate enough. So when I graduated, I went to intelligence school and became an intelligence officer, and then went like high and right and took a total deviation from your typical intelligence officer career in the Air Force. I was incredibly fortunate to fall into joint operations and joint special operations very quickly and very early on in my career, my Air Force career. And man, I couldn't have learned from better people. It is the best leadership environment that I think I've ever been a part of. And it's not for everybody, that's for sure. But for people that are competent, want to be trusted for their competency, and are willing to lean forward and take some risks, like I mentioned, it's a place to be, hands down. The thing I love the most about the special operations community is how flat it is. And what I mean by that is, gosh, like massive corporate like giants in the world are starting to adopt these organizational models from these units. So it works. But what I mean by a flat organization is everyone is entrusted to be a master of whatever it is they are on the team to do. So you are expected to show up and give excellence every single day. And if you don't do that, you're not on the team. It's very black and white. You know where you stand. There's no like, oh, well, so and so sucks at this. So, we are going to ostracize them or like put them on some like random duty that has nothing to do with what they do. It's all about you. Here's the standard. You meet the standard or exceed it, ideally, and you'll be on the team and you'll have a slot. And I loved how transparent that was. Obviously, there's politics involved literally anywhere you work, but I felt like it was less so there. And everyone lives, eats, breathes, sleeps the mission. Die hard, fanatical about this is our mission. We will be the best and we will execute the mission. And having that super transparent organizational structure on top of just a radical approach to what your objective is or what you're trying to do, man, it's a recipe for success.
And you did that as a young officer. So
Yeah.
talk about what kind of you talked about standards and hopefully exceeding them. What kind of stress or expectations did that put on you? How did you deal with that and lead through it?
Yeah. Gosh, stress, all kinds of stress. For I want to be good at what I do. That's just I think everybody does, but I have like this weird, not quite perfectionism, but like I want to be really good at what I do. And so that environment is extremely stressful for someone like me because I want to be best and I will work everyone to the bone. If like I will outwork anyone basically to achieve that. So that level of stress is unlike any I've ever felt before because of that reason. Absolutely worth it, but it was a factor. Um and I think that parlayed into a lot of aspects of my life. Like my personal life suffered immensely because of the stress that I was carrying from the job and how much I was trying to pour into the job. You get left with there's nothing left in the tank, right? And so I think that was a really really tough thing. I was also the Air Force. Just I was never part of like there's major like Air Force special operations units. I
Hmm.
was always on the joint side, so I was always like your token Air Force person showing up having to, like, learn and speak the Navy who treat each other way differently, and then, oh my god, the Army. The way the Army even talks to each other, you're just like, "Oh my gosh, how" this is so foreign to me, and so I think there was also another layer of stress on top of that being, like, kind of an outlier in a sense,
Hmm.
and having to, like, chameleon my way through those communities and
Hmm.
look and talk like them, and be part of that team was always challenging. Not to mention, I was always the only girl. And so you just naturally get treated differently, right? And I think that was obviously a lot there was another layer of stress. Lots of layers on top of
Right.
layers if you get the picture.
How do you navigate, if you were to coach Emma through this again, like if you were to go back in time and say, here's how you would approach it differently, knowing how it affected and impacted your personal life, pouring in and then realizing there was nothing more to pour. What would you offer yourself as advice?
Look at the long game. I think taking a step back, it's really easy to get sucked into And frankly, everybody in the community does and deals with different issues because of it. But it's very easy to get addicted to that churn and to that excellence and to the mission. And I think that someday that has to end. You can't do, like, nobody does that forever. And I think most people um, struggle to see the long game, myself included. Um, but like I said, in the beginning, landed on my feet and I've created an amazing like personal life for myself outside of certainly the heartache before. Um, but I think because I was young and immature, I was really focused on the 5 meter target and not looking at like in 10 years is this going to matter? Probably not. But that's an immaturity thing all day.
So take some time. Were there certain people that helped you, either leaders, mentors, maybe your father? Like, who were there some that you would lean into when you no longer had something in the tank to kind of get you to see the long
Yeah.
game or to pull you through those moments where you're like, gosh, I don't know what else I have to give.
My family for sure tried to help with that. Um, it was tough though because the community is very specific, and so it's really hard to explain, like, "This is how I'm feeling in the situation that's in front of me," to people that have not been in it. Um, and this isn't like an exclusionary thing, like, "Oh, you gotta be in the club." It's more like there's just nuances that make it difficult for someone that hasn't been through it to really understand, like, what you're going through. And so while my family has always been just this rock for me, I don't know that they really understood a lot of, like, the nuances that apply to, like, well, this is why I'm feeling the way that I am or the struggles I'm dealing with. And God, my dad had an incredible Air Force career with immense challenges I know nothing about and couldn't have given him any advice on. But I think he also didn't know how to give me some of that advice because I was in completely different scenarios than he was, for example.
I think that's really relevant in the fact how we lead people with different experiences, not even just talking about on the battlefield, but I think just in life, when people have walked their own walks, how do you lead them through it, understanding that you can't understand everything they've gone through?
Yeah.
What would be some advice you would offer to how to approach that? And maybe in the lens you might wear is if someone were to approach you now, understanding that they don't know what you've been through, how could they maybe have done it more successfully?
I think in general, society does a really bad job at active listening. And so I think it always starts with just open your ears and your heart and like really take in what someone is trying to lay down for you about a struggle that they have, right? And gosh, like my sister is a great example of this. She does something completely different than me and she is a rock star and just totally kicks ass. And she struggles with things that I have never been like I've never dealt with. I'll never understand. And I've recently really tried to take my own advice I just gave, which is sometimes somebody just needs you to listen. And often maybe a different perspective is helpful and needed. But my gosh, like just being heard is the first step in the right direction. And to your point about leading people from all different walks of life with different backgrounds and experiences, sure, you may not know anything about like where they come from or why they feel the way that they do. But if you can just like take a minute, not look at devices, like actively engage with someone and just say like, "Hey, what's going on? Like talk to me more about that." And then ask questions about like, "Well, why do you think they said that?" or "How did that make you feel?" Like all the stuff we know how to do, but actually doing it, I think is always a great first step. And then follow through. If you promise to do something or to help out in some way, man, you better follow through. Because if you don't, you just totally let that person down worse than maybe their struggle had been that they brought to you.
Right. Thank you for sharing that, and I think that's so helpful, just in general, that we can all take as a good, I think, leadership and empathetic leadership lesson as well. So, I'd like to shift gears a little bit, and you talked about a little bit ago landing on your feet and somehow understanding that being in the special operations community is not a forever thing. And so, how did you know when it was time to make that transition? What did that look like for you?
Well, kind of a disappointing time in my life. I had been accepted into a pretty elite unit within the special operations community, and it I was very excited about that opportunity. And the Air Force intelligence career field would not release me to go do it. They wanted me to instead go and work a different mission. They thought I had been working in special operations for too long and needed more breadth, if you will, and understanding of the Air Force intelligence mission, which in hindsight, like, I get it. I was their body that kinda disappeared for a while and then wanted to disappear more, and they were like, Not so fast." So I understand that. I owed my pound of flesh back to the Air Force for sure, but it happened at a time where I could get out. And so, after many conversations, with a lot of people that I trust and love, the consensus was, "You're pretty marketable right now. If you wanna go build a different career for yourself, now's a good time to go do it, because the longer you invest in this, Air Force career, that it diminishes over time, not immediately, but it could diminish over time, and you might miss out on some opportunities to go contribute in other ways." And while I'm sad, like, I loved being in the Air Force. I loved working the mission that I did. I loved the people I worked with. I can confidently say today that I am probably contributing the same, if not more, back to the mission on my own terms and able to like bring a coalition of the willing with me to do that. That was such a pivotal moment in life that I had no idea. It was scary getting out. Like I had no idea where this was headed. And now I'm like, man, in hindsight, that was pretty good decision. So that's what it looked like. Nobody ever knows what's gonna happen. You just kinda try to make a series of right steps, I guess.
Well, I'd like to dive into that scary a
Yeah.
little bit. And what was that transition like? Did you already have something planned? Did you script it as you went? I think that's interesting for us to know about you.
Yeah, um so because I worked with, the Joint Special Operations Community, in command specifically, I was privy to and exposed to new and cool technologies and kinda fell in love with the idea of like, "Oh, wow, you could, like, build new things that solve problems." And that was my first connection at all to, oh, technology is like a thing you can go into. Like, that's a life, like, career. And I was fortunate enough to get into a transition program called TechQual at the time that took basically their whole value proposition to tech companies was you're missing the boat on all these vets that are getting out. They're very smart, they're very disciplined, self starters. You guys should hire them, and we'll do you one better. We'll teach them about the tech industry so that they're not like completely clueless when they show up on your doorstep. So I went through that program and took a job right out of the gate, still kind of unsure of like, sure, hopefully this works, and haven't looked back. I've had different jobs. Initially, I went completely commercial, didn't do anything with the government, and got sucked right back in by an academy grad who made a phone call and was like, "Emma, you gotta come back and help with the Air Force," and that led to a series of other things to where now, here we are doing what we do with Strike Solutions and squarely in the mission space and, very much contributing and have come full circle.
So you said a grad pulled you back in. So I think it's fascinating how the long blue line has this thread. I mean,
It
obviously the
does.
thread started early with you with your dad, but the fact that you took that leap, you transitioned out knowing that you were looking at the long game, but then a grad pulled you back into how you might support the defense sector. How did that? I mean, talk about that a little bit because I do think there's the networking piece is really important in transitions.
It is, and we don't do it enough. Like, our Air Force Academy grads don't do it enough. I got pulled into tech qual by Naval Academy grads. Guys, like, obviously, I'm super grateful to them, but also I was like, "Why are you calling me right now? I'm not an Air Force grad." Um, but yeah, the long blue line is alive and well. One thing that I think a challenge we face as Air Force grads versus West Point or Navy is a lot of people go fly. And as a flyer, you're probably going to odds are you're going to stay 20 years. And so I think we miss a lot of the prime young career networking opportunities that a West Point or Navy grad might benefit from. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing it for the people that didn't fly, that got out early, or set up the same kind of concept for people when they do get out at 20 years. So I think that there's obviously like some challenges we face that the other academies do not. But man, like without a Navy grad pulling me in initially to say you should go into tech, and then eventually an Air Force Academy grad calling me and saying, I want you on my team to do this. Um, Everything that we're doing now is because of grads that have like kind of helped each other out through networking. It's so
Wow.
huge. It's
Yeah.
the most important thing that we deserve as grads and that we owe to each other.
So let's talk about what you're doing now. So, you got sucked in by a naval grad and an Air Force grad, and now you have formed your own business, Strike Solutions, correct? Can you talk about that? What is that like?
Yeah. Well, Strike Solutions is very, very near and dear and very exciting to me. We have the best team on the market. We have brought together almost our entire team comes from mission. So they've touched special operations in some way. And we are building a hardware and software product. It's called Thunderdome, and it is an edge sensor fusion product. So our entire thesis is that there are signals out in the ether and more of them as a result of the Internet of Things. And those are opportunities for you to understand a digital fingerprint that might exist around you as a result of these signals. So our technology sits at the edge and makes sense of those signals so that you can understand the digital fingerprint around you. Um, Primarily built for the defense customer, and really have done a great job proliferating that message in very specific communities. But starting to see more and more commercial applicability. So we're starting to jump the fence a little bit and work in commercial spaces. But that's us in a nutshell.
That's fascinating. I think technology in itself, I mean, it's endless, right? The bounds of technology. And I think, the fact that you were in such a space where you're on the cutting edge of it, so it's innovative on top of it. How does one navigate that? I mean, it's so vast. How do you navigate understanding what when you're not in the community, what the community needs, because you have to understand the problems before you can create solutions. How do you do all of that?
Gosh, it's such a good question. So, to your point about technology being so vast, you nailed it. In fact, it's almost stifling sometimes because we're a product company and we're building a product, and you have to make a series of decisions as that product evolves of like, we should add that capability or we should ignore this because it's a flash in the pan and nobody's going to buy it. And you're placing a series of bets all the time about what technologies you think are interesting and enduring. And it's a lot. It's distracting. There's a shiny penny every day. And that'd probably be the biggest complaint from my team about me personally that I recognize is like it's really you have to be focused and you have to make smart bets based on the focus you set for yourself. And with such a vast industry, it's very difficult. Um, and then to your point about you do have to come from the community to really know, like, or at least I think it helps. So being able to sit across from an operator, for example, and them not have to clean up in their mind, have to translate from acronym to full long, them not having to do that it cuts down on 30 minutes of the meeting and they can get to the meat and potatoes of like, here's what I need, here's what I think I can spend on it. Like, and you get to the brass tacks and they're not having to like pull you along and educate you. So my advice to companies that don't have that expertise is go get it. There are so many vets in the space that are doing such great things in that like technology translation space that you should hire for that because you're never going to be able to train to it. And it's also like vets are great people to work with. They'll work hard and they're disciplined and all the things I said earlier. So, um, my thing is you should have that on your team. Um, Otherwise, I don't know how far you get in understanding what a customer's problems are.
Wow. So leading in such a vast environment, with such a great team, I think puts a lot of pressure on you, which obviously you're accustomed to, which that's is a good thing. Talk a little bit about though, have you had to make any course corrections along the way based off of bad bets or, the risks that you've taken, and how have you navigated that as a leader?
Of course, we've made bad bets, and it's one of those things, just like I kind of mentioned earlier, is like one of my key tenets is having the flexibility. First of all, having the having the stomach to say like, "Oof, this didn't work out the way that I wanted it to," or maybe we were wrong about that. Step one, right? Admitting the problem. Step two is then pivot, move on, let it go, just let it go, and either take some great lessons learned from it. Hopefully, you do, or just bail on it and like go on to something different. And
Right.
I think the sooner our thing that we are always talking about is get to know as fast as you can. Like, no is an okay answer, but man, let's get there as fast as we can because the more time you iterate and waste on like bad ideas that you don't know if they're bad yet, but they're going to be, the sooner you can get to know, the better off you are.
Would you say that sounds like great advice, whether you're, running a business or, leading teams just in general.
Yeah.
But have you seen that some cost saving measures as well for yourself?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so candidly, we're not a funded, so we have not gone out and raised money. We are a completely bootstrap company, which means every dollar in the door is accounted for. All 100 pennies of it are accounted for and used for something special at our company. And so our bets matter a lot because we don't have cash lying around that we can just place a bet and go, meh, we'll see how that turns out. We have to be very intentional. And so I think that there are some companies out there that do have a significant amount of capital where they can throw some things around and it doesn't matter as much what the outcome is. And man, are we envious of them. But at the same time, I do feel like it's made us lean and mean. And we have to really evaluate what we're going to pursue because we don't have a whole lot of wiggle room.
Gosh, Emma, I feel like I've seen so many glimpses of the path that you've walked from leaving the academy, learning about yourself, coming back, going into a community, pushing the boundaries, understanding about yourself, taking a leap with courage. It seems like it's translated into the incredible leader that you are today. And I think what's so inspiring about you being one of our Young Alumni Excellence Award winners and a member of our current, Association of Graduates board. Talk about some of the responsibilities from that side of it, wearing that leadership hat when you think about, inspiring others.
Um, First of all, I think that Young Alumni Award is a fluke. I still don't know how I got that, to be honest. So,
Should I go back to the
but
introduction, and do you want me to do that again for
you're
you?
so nice. Maybe. No, I feel very strongly that I owe a debt to the academy. I think I was forged in fire there, and I am the most imperfect human on the planet. But that place just set me up with a mindset that um, is so special and important to me and the people that I work with, and my husband and my kids. And I feel like if I'm not giving back to the academy, I'm not being true to why I'm the way that I am. So, from an AOG perspective, I felt called to serve. I'm just wrapping up my 8th year. I am officially being voted off the island because I've served too long, and it has been very challenging. Just to be frank, like it's been a very challenging thing that I feel like I've matured through over the last 8 years for sure. But man, like I owe it to the academy to try and make it better, and that was a way that I thought I could contribute over the last 8 years. The Young Alumni Award, like I said, is man just totally unexpected and so humbling. Um, but I feel like that place is not perfect. There's a lot of people that are really angry about things that happen to them at the academy. Guess what? I am too. I wasn't treated perfectly, but you'd be lying to yourself if you didn't look back and see everything it gave you, if for nothing else than a free education, which is so hard to come by. And so I feel like every grad owes some in some way to give back, whether that's connecting other grads and helping them make themselves better, or giving back to the institution directly.
Wow. And you learned that you had that sense of giving back really just a couple years after graduation.
Yeah. Well, I think it's because I've been brainwashed since I was a kid that like the academy is the greatest ever. And I have the most fond memories of being at football games with my parents and like having like a little stuffed falcon with me. And just that place is not like any other. It's just special. And guess what? You can't buy your way in there. Like it is one of the few remaining places where it's like you got to be good enough to get in. And I feel very strongly, and I have for a long time, that as much as it might have been a pain to go through there, and there we could go on and on. You could have a whole podcast about like just complaining because grads love to complain. Um, but you'd be lying to yourself if it didn't give you something. I refuse to believe anyone that says it didn't give me something. And you owe something back for that.
So talking about the academy giving you something, I wonder if it's going to play into this next question. And my question for you, Emma, is what are some of the tangible things you do today that make you a better leader? I'm curious if it stemmed from your time at the academy or what that's evolved to, but can you share that?
Yes, I try to get better every day. I am not there are so many I have a list of weaknesses that I don't make the list, but I just know. I know that there are, like, blind spots that I have, and I try every day to get better at them. And my gosh, like, if that's, like, the worst that I can say is, like, I'm actively trying, to lead people better, to be a better business partner, to be a better family member, to be a better whatever. Um, that's learned from the academy, is just be better, like, show up and try and just try. And I think that that's probably the most, like, outstanding trait that I can think of as, like, an outlier of a tangible thing that I would encourage everyone to do, whether it's reading a book or, like, trying something different stylistically. Just try to do something better and work on yourself.
Well, it's almost like you read my mind what I was gonna ask you next because I think, as, sometimes we think about that's wonderful what you are doing. I was gonna ask if you would give that same advice to others if they're trying to become better leaders. Like, what's something you think they could do today to make them better leaders in the future? Is that
Ask
the
for
same
feedback.
advice you'd give them? Ask for
Yeah,
feedback.
ask for feedback and be willing to take it. Um, Gosh, get punched in the face. I think everyone needs to be punched in the face once just so they know what it feels like. But be willing to take a punch in the face and, like, you don't wanna be the emperor with no clothes on. You wanna be somebody that, at the very least, is like, "Mm, you got me there. Like, I really screwed that one up." And being able to say, "I screwed up. What did I do wrong, and how could I be better?" I have to believe it goes a long way with people that you're working with, and treating them as if they're someone that you're working with and not someone that works for you. I'm a big believer in that. Um, I think you get honest communication then, and it rises all boats, right? It's a rising tide for all boats.
Would you be willing to share an example when you kind of took a punch like that, literally or figuratively, in the face where you learned something about yourself that changed you to be better?
Oh, there's so many, Nivir. I'm like the professional of getting punched in the face. Um,
Maybe a
Trying
recent
to
one or
think.
something that,
Yeah. Yeah. I learned I I said show up and try, and like that's a great first step. Sometimes you could be trying a little too hard to try, right? And I have had like my team who I trust immensely, and I think we have a great relationship because they will tell me like you need to do this differently because here's all the like effects you don't even know are happening when you
Mm.
do this.
Right.
And that's hard to hear. It especially for me because I'm trying so hard all the time, or I care deeply about
Right.
like what our outcomes are. And when you're that invested, it hurts to get hit in the face because you're like, "Well, this is my baby," or this is my, the way I think is best. And I think the second you can get over that and have an honest brokered conversation to understand, like, all right, where am I being blind? And then actively do something to change that, or at least have it conscious so that you're aware of it, is like that is what you're trying to do here, right? So, um, I would say like I ask my guys for feedback all the time, and I get honest feedback all the time. And at the time, it'll make me like go for a long run and be mad, but then I always come back and I'm like, okay, we're gonna do this a little bit differently, and I've done my part. Now here's the trick to that, Navir, is here's some feedback for you guys too,
Mm.
and you're going to be held accountable for this feedback, because I need you to also operate differently. So making it be a two-way street is critical for any like functioning organization in my mind.
Thank you for sharing that, Emma.
Yeah.
Well, we are going to spend a little bit more time getting the last bits of information on leadership lessons from Emma. But first, we want to take a moment to thank you for listening to Long Blue Leadership. The podcast publishes Tuesdays in both video and audio and is available on all your favorite podcast platforms. Be sure to watch, listen, and subscribe to all episodes of Long Blue Leadership at longblueleadership.org. So, Emma, one of the things I always love to ask is, what didn't we talk about that you really want to make sure we put on the table here today? Whether it's been around the areas of leadership or just self-discovery through your journey, what can we leave our listeners with?
In all of the seriousness, because we covered a lot of serious and like deep topics, um, one thing, and I completely give credit on this to my amazing family who has just gotten me through all of like crazy ups and downs that we briefly touched upon today, is to never lose your sense of humor about all of this. Like life is super short, it's precious. Um, and if you cannot keep a sense of humor and laugh, what is the point of any of this? And for a lot of grads, we go into very super serious roles,
Yeah.
where the stakes are incredibly high and mistakes can't be made. And I respect all of that and been there, done that, got it. But the second you lose your sense of humor, man, like it's just not fun anymore. So I'm a big fan of like, make sure you build in fun in, because you never know when your time is going to be called, and you should live life to the fullest in that way.
Thank you for sharing that, Emma. And thank you for joining us on Long Blue Leadership.
Man, this was an absolute pleasure, truly. And just an honor to be here with you, Navir. You're just the best. I adore you. And
Thank you.
man, what a very humbling experience, and not deserving at all, but I really appreciate you inviting me on here.
Well, we can't wait to continue to follow your journey and see all the amazing impact you'll continue to lead. Thanks,
Thank you.
Emma.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Long Blue Leadership. The podcast drops every 2 weeks on Tuesdays and is available on all your favorite podcast apps. Send your comments and guest ideas to us at socialmedia@usafa.org and listen to past episodes at longblueleadership.org.